welcome to the sixth grade end of the year awards. This is Ms. Driscoll, and on behalf of all the sixth grade teachers, we want to say how really proud we all are of you. It has certainly been an interesting and challenging year. You all have hung in there, worked hard, and become better for it. We want to acknowledge all of you for all your hard work. However, usually at the end of the year, what we do is we do acknowledge those for pride and accomplishment for each subject. We're going to start today with the Pride Awards. And the Pride Award is given to students who have demonstrated outstanding effort and hard work throughout the school year. These students always strive to do their best and persevere when presented with a challenge. Ms. Morgan is going to present the Special Area Pride Awards.
Our first award for Pride in Technology from Ms. DiVirgilio and Mr. Pedrazic goes to Nicholas Oliveri. Our Pride Award for Health and Physical Education from the PE Department goes to Kayla Rivera. Our Pride Award in Gifted from Ms. Strickland goes to Emma Mulligan. And our Pride Award in Art from Ms. Brewster and Ms. Kelly goes to Nora Halides.
And on behalf of all the sixth grade teachers, Mr. Toner is going to present our Pride Award.
Okay, Pride in Mathematics goes to Tyler Ronca from Mrs. Matazzo. To Miguel Mendez Perez from Mrs. Matazzo. To Diesel Alonso Sanchez from Mrs. Matazzo. To Christopher Coe from Mrs. Cairns. To Michaela Harrell from Mrs. Cairns. To Shalia Allen from Mrs. Cairns. And to Jayla Rochette from Mrs. Drumbore. To Daniel Garcia from Mrs. Drumbore. To Jaden Pullman, from Mrs. Drumbore. Journey Williams from Mrs. Eastburn. To Dylan Gonzalez Mesa from Mrs. Eastburn. For Language Arts, Aiden Terrazas from Miss Driscoll. Heidi Davila Chavez from Miss Driscoll. Anjay Wallace from Miss Driscoll. Fabian Zephyrin from Mrs. Passoff. Christina Zurita Ayala from Mrs. Passoff. Mia Cordero from Mrs. Passoff. Jimmy Trejo from Mrs. Rothfeld. Jorge Trejo from Mrs. Rothfeld. And Venus Mendoza Venancio from Mrs. Rothfeld. To Lykel Richardson from Mr. Hennessy. To Alejandra Vega from Mr. Hennessy. Jorge Vargas from Mrs. Diamond. Amy Cabral Sanchez from Mrs. Diamond. In Science, Ashley Green from Mrs. Goff. Eric Moitel Mora from Mrs. Goff. Maggie Scaramella from Mrs. Goff. Haley Zernone from Mrs. Lee Madison. Alana Thompson from Mrs. Lee Madison. Adam Cortez Rios from Mrs. Lee Madison. Angel Gonzalez from Mrs. Lee Madison. Alejandro Vega from Mrs. Lee Madison. Nick Oliveri from Mrs. Lee Madison. In Social Studies, Daniel Edwards from Mrs. Goff. Christina Wilson from Mrs. Goff. Nicholas Bonamico from Mrs. Goff. David Paolillo from myself. Katarina McClellan from myself. Imelda Hernandez from myself. Sophia Gomez Medina from myself. Samuel Brown from myself. Alasia Pardilla from myself.
Okay, next we have the Achievement Awards. And the Achievement Award is given to students for their successful academic accomplishments and their strong work ethic. These students consistently perform at a high level. And Mrs. Brewster is going to present for special areas.
All right, so the Chorus Award is going to go to Nick Bonamico from Miss Puglisi. The orchestra award is going to go to Tyler Ronca from Mr. Trujillo. The band award is going to go to Jordan Shea from Mr. Trujillo. Technology is going to go to Jacqueline Leanne Anderson from Mrs. DiVirgilio and Mr. Pedrazik. The physical education goes to Evan Bartlett in the PE department. The gifted award goes to Maggie Scagarella by Ms. Strickland. And the art award goes to Maricela Roman Vargas from me and Mrs. Kelly.
And Mr. Hennessy is going to present our achievement awards in our academic subjects.
Okay, for mathematics, the achievement award goes to Jordan Shea from Mrs. Matazzo. Talia Guarino from Mrs. Matazzo. Ureli Delgado Mendez from Mrs. Matazzo. Scott Majewski from Mrs. Cairns. Kyrie Holmes from Mrs. Cairns. Kimberly Orozco Areguin from Mrs. Cairns. Edelson Zoe De Leon from Mrs. Drumbore. Catherine Pavone Arita from Mrs. Drumbore. Nyasia Livingston from Mrs. Drumbore. Gianni Dorner from Mrs. Eastburn. Janaya L. Brown from Mrs. Eastburn. For language arts, Karen Buke De Leon from Miss Driscoll. Honora Haldis from Miss Driscoll. Sarah Sharui from Miss Driscoll. Layla Boykins from Mrs. Possoff. Brianna Tertier from Mrs. Possoff. Joseph Lakin from Mrs. Possoff. Savannah Jackson from Mrs. Rothfeld. Naimia Ellis Ferrione from Mrs. Rothfeld. Abby Karsner from Mrs. Rothfeld. Jeremiah Chinaku from Mr. Hennessy. And Imelda Hernandez from Mr. Hennessy. Gabriel Hernandez Garcia from Mrs. Diamond. Jessica Jimenez Manuel from Mrs. Diamond. For science, Ian Rosen from Mrs. Goff. Amir Merricks from Mrs. Goff. Antonio Espinoza from Mrs. Goff. Jacqueline Anderson from Mrs. Lee Madison. C.G. McCullough from Mrs. Lee Madison. Kadira Baker from Mrs. Lee Madison. Cache Orsby from Mrs. Lee Madison. Jolie Wally from Mrs. Lee Madison. Luis Sanchez Chavez from Mrs. Lee Madison. And for social studies, Jack Falk from Mrs. Goff. Savannah Robinson from Mrs. Goff. Hannah Fisher from Mrs. Goff. Aiden Falcone from Mr. Toner. Jorge Santiago from Mr. Toner. Adriana Battle from Mr. Toner. Jessica Jimenez Manuel from Mr. Toner. Jalen Hunter from Mr. Toner. And Brenda Sanabia Gondarias from Mr. Toner.
Mrs. Cairns is now going to talk about our PFC award.
Okay, the PFC award is given to one boy and one girl from each triad. The students who receive this award demonstrate the qualities of a good citizen on a regular basis. They are respectful, responsible, trustworthy, and caring. The awards this year go to Emma Mulligan, Morgan Martin, Jessica Jimenez Manuel, Brandon Purdy, Evan Bartlett, and Alex Saldivar. These 6 kids, if we go to the next slide, they will be getting their certificates and gift cards when they pick up their belongings from their lockers and dropping off their Chromebooks. All other award recipients can print their certificate from this slideshow, which will be shared on your Google Classrooms.
Thank you all, 6th graders, for a fantastic year. We all wish we could say goodbye to you in person. We appreciate your hard work in these unique circumstances. We want you to have an amazing summer, and we look forward to seeing you guys all in the fall.